The scent of yeast, cinnamon, and burnt sugar was the only inheritance I had ever truly cared about. It was the smell of my life, the aroma of a love story that began when my late husband, Arthur, first dusted this very counter with flour 40 years ago. He used to say that a bakery wasn't a business, it was a living thing that you had to feed with warmth and care. The Flour and Time Bakery was our breathing diary, its pages filled with the birthdays, anniversaries, and everyday moments of our community. The floorboards, now worn into gentle valleys along the main paths, still creaked with his memory, a symphony of wood and time that played the soundtrack of our shared dreams. Each morning, as I unlocked the heavy oak door that Arthur had installed himself, I could almost feel his presence beside me, his calloused hands guiding mine as we prepared for another day of feeding our neighbors' souls. I still worked the counter most mornings, my hands, now wrinkled and wise, instinctively knowing the weight of a perfect brioche. The muscle memory was sacred. 20 grams of yeast, a precise pinch of salt, the exact moment when dough transformed from ingredients into promise. I did it not out of necessity, but because seeing Mrs. Gable's smile as I handed her the halwa for her Sabbath dinner, the same order she's had for 30 years, was my connection to Arthur, to the life we had built from scratch. My children, Leo and Clara, saw things differently. To them, the bakery's charm was an inefficiency, its history a liability. Leo, my ferociously ambitious son with a freshly minted MBA and a vocabulary to match, saw an underperforming asset in a prime real estate location. His eyes, once bright with wonder at the magic of rising dough, now saw only square footage and profit margins. Clara, a social media strategist who viewed the world through a grid of perfectly curated photos, saw a brand with an authentic narrative that could be leveraged for a massive payout. She had inherited Arthur's artistic eye, but somewhere along the way, she had learned to monetize beauty instead of simply creating it. They had come to me last week, not for a family dinner, but for an ambush disguised as a business presentation. In our small apartment above the bakery, Leo had set up a projector, casting cold, blue light charts onto the very wall that held our faded wedding photo, Arthur's arm looped proudly around my waist. The irony wasn't lost on me, their father's image illuminated by the harsh glow of corporate efficiency. He spoke of leveraging real estate value, pivoting to a high-yield asset, and the depreciation of fixtures and fittings. His words were sharp and cutting, delivered with the mechanical precision of someone who had forgotten that businesses were built by human hands, not algorithms. Clara chimed in with talk of creating an Instagrammable experience, suggesting a neon sign where Arthur's old proofing cabinet stood, the same cabinet where he had taught both children to read the language of dough, to understand when it was ready to become bread. "Imagine the selfie wall, Mom," she'd chirped, her enthusiasm as artificial as the lighting she was proposing. The words were sterile, soulless, the language of a hostile takeover. They were proposing to sell the Flour and Time to Global Bites Hospitality, a faceless conglomerate notorious for buying beloved local institutions and replacing them with generic, high-turnover cafes that served frozen pastries thawed on site. I had seen their work before. The death of Murphy's Deli down the street, transformed overnight into a place where personality went to die, where everything tasted like cardboard and indifference. The deal, Leo explained with the condescending patience of a man explaining something simple to a child, would set me up for life. I wouldn't have to worry about a thing. His tone was the same one he had used as a teenager when he thought I didn't understand technology, forgetting that I had been balancing books and managing inventory long before he learned to tie his shoes. "Mom, we're doing this for you," Clara had said, her voice laced with the synthetic sincerity she used for her sponsored posts. "So you can finally relax. Travel. You've earned a life without 4 a.m. alarms." She spoke as if those early mornings were a burden, not understanding that the quiet hour before dawn, When I had the bakery to myself and could feel Arthur's spirit most strongly, was when I felt most alive. My life is here, I had said quietly, looking at the charts that reduced 40 years of our sweat, laughter, and occasional tears into bleak financial projections. How do you quantify the weight of Mrs. Chen's gratitude when we delivered soup and bread to her family during her husband's cancer treatment? How do you put a dollar value on the moment when young Tommy Martinez took his first bite of our chocolate croissant and his face lit up like Christmas morning? Leo sighed, a sound heavy with the burden of dealing with an emotional, irrational parent. Mom, be realistic. This place is a relic. It's hemorrhaging potential profit. Its value is locked in the bricks and mortar, not in your sourdough starter. He gestured dismissively at the corner where I kept my starter, a living culture that was older than both my children, fed daily for decades, a testament to continuity and care. We have a multi-million-dollar offer on the table. It would be fundamentally irresponsible to ignore it. He clicked to a final slide, an artist's rendering of a sleek, chrome and glass cafe with cold lighting and uncomfortable-looking stools. The design was everything our bakery wasn't: impersonal, efficient, forgettable. This, he announced with a flourish, is the future. It felt like he was showing me a brochure for my own funeral, a sterile monument to everything I had spent my life building and they were determined to destroy. The humiliation was a cold, heavy weight in my chest. They weren't just selling a building, they were liquidating my identity, and they were congratulating themselves on the handsome price they'd secured for it. For 2 days, I walked through the bakery like a ghost, haunted by my children's betrayal. Every familiar object felt like an accusation. The worn handle on the oven door, polished smooth by thousands of openings, seemed to mock my sentimentality. The faint ring on the counter where Arthur always set down his coffee cup, a perfect circle of memory, looked like evidence of my failure to evolve. My regular customers noticed my distraction. Mrs. Rodriguez asked if I was feeling well. Young Father McKenna, who stopped by every morning for his cinnamon roll and coffee, lingered longer than usual, his eyes kind and concerned. My children saw a depreciating asset. I saw the sacred geography of my marriage, the physical manifestation of a love that had created not just a business, but a cornerstone of community life. But grief is an energy, and so is anger. On the third day, instead of despairing, I went to work. Not downstairs in the shop, but in the small, cluttered office at the back, a room Leo and Clara hadn't set foot in since they were children searching for cookie tins. They had their spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations, but I had the real records. In a heavy, steel lockbox tucked beneath years of tax returns was the ledger Arthur and I had kept meticulously by hand. Each page was a testament to our partnership, written in both our hands, his careful script recording sales, mine tracking expenses, and noting the personal stories behind each transaction. It was the soul of our business, a handwritten history of 4 decades of service. Page after page of entries detailing every local farmer we supported, every loan we'd paid off early, every community bake sale we had sponsored. We were debt-free. We were profitable. We were small, but we were strong. And then I found it. Taped to the inside lid of the box was a thick, cream-colored envelope, the paper soft with age. My name was written on the front in Arthur's familiar, elegant script, the same handwriting that had penned love letters during our courtship, grocery lists during our early marriage, and birthday cards for our children. My hands trembled as I opened it, expecting perhaps a final love letter, a goodbye I had never received. Inside was not a sentimental letter, but a legal document and a short, handwritten note. "My dearest Agnes," the note began, and I could hear his voice as clearly as if he were standing beside me. "If you are reading this, it means our children have their city eyes on. They have good hearts, but they see the world in dollars, and they might try to convince you that our life's work is just another number on a balance sheet. I have made provisions. You were never just my wife. You are my full partner. The soul of this place is you. Don't let them sell it. The document was a revelation, a masterpiece of foresight from my quiet, thoughtful husband. Arthur had always been the planner, the one who thought 3 steps ahead while I focused on the day-to-day magic of creating something beautiful from flour and water. It was the charter for something called the Keystone Trust. When we had incorporated the business decades ago, Arthur, with the help of a shrewd old lawyer named Brennan who had since passed away, had structured the ownership in a way I had long forgotten. On paper, the shares were split: 33% for me, 33% for Leo, and 34% for Arthur. But Arthur's shares were not passed directly to the children in his will, as they had assumed. They were held in this silent trust, a legal guardian of his intentions. And the trust charter, which I was now reading with dawning wonder and a growing smile, was explicit. In the event of a proposed sale of the entire business entity, the voting rights of the trust were to be activated and executed solely by the surviving founding partner. Me. My 33% share, combined with the trust's 34%, gave me 67% of the vote. I wasn't a sentimental roadblock standing in the way of progress and profit. I was the majority shareholder, the ultimate decision-maker, the keeper of Arthur's faith in our shared vision. The final meeting was set for Friday. Leo and Clara had booked a conference room at a sterile downtown hotel, the kind of place where deals were made and dreams were buried under fluorescent lights. The buyer from Global Bites, a man named Henderson with a plastic smile and predatory eyes that reminded me of the sharks I'd seen in nature documentaries, was already there when I arrived. My children were buzzing with triumphant energy, their excitement palpable as they anticipated their windfall. "Mom, so glad you came around," Leo said, patting my arm with the patronizing affection of someone who thought the battle was already won. "Mr. Henderson is about to walk us through the final offer. It's even better than we thought." His confidence was absolute, his victory assumed. Clara was already on her phone, probably calculating how she would spend her share of the proceeds. I took my seat at the head of the polished conference table, placing my worn leather handbag, the same one Arthur had given me for our 10th anniversary, carefully beside my chair. I listened silently as Henderson laid out his vision of synergistic supply chains and gutting the bakery to install a soulless, optimized customer journey. He spoke of efficiency metrics and throughput maximization, reducing the art of baking to a series of corporate buzzwords. When he was finished, all eyes turned to me, expecting a final, grateful signature on documents that would erase 40 years of love and labor. "It's a very thorough presentation, Mr. Henderson," I began, my voice calm and clear, carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades commanding respect in a room full of flour dust and rising steam. "You've successfully calculated the price of our real estate, our equipment, even our name. But there is a significant asset you failed to put on your spreadsheet because it cannot be quantified. It is the trust of a neighborhood. It is the comfort of a taste that has remained unchanged for 40 years. It is the value of being a place where a widow can come for a kind word and a warm loaf of bread." I looked at Leo, then at Clara, seeing not the confident adults they thought they were, but the children who had once helped me ice cookies for the school bake sale, who had fallen asleep to the sound of me kneading dough for the next day's bread. "You have been operating under the assumption that you hold the controlling interest in the flour and time. You don't." I slid the trust document across the table with the quiet drama of someone playing a winning hand. Leo picked it up, his brow furrowed in confusion, his confidence beginning to crack like an overproofed loaf. Clara leaned over his shoulder, her expression shifting from excitement to confusion, then to disbelief, and finally to something that looked almost like respect. "What is this?" Leo stammered, his confident facade crumbling like day-old pastry. "That," I said, allowing myself a small smile, "is your father's wisdom. He loved you both more than life itself. But he loved what we built enough to protect it from well-meaning children who might lose sight of its true value. The Keystone Trust holds his shares, and in this specific situation, its voting rights fall to me. I control 67% of this company, and I do not consent to the sale. Henderson was a shark who knew when the water had turned against him. He stood abruptly, his plastic smile finally cracking to reveal the cold calculation beneath. "Clearly, you have family matters to resolve," he said curtly, gathering his papers with the efficiency of a man who had made many such retreats. "My offer is withdrawn." And just like that, he was gone, leaving behind only the faint smell of expensive cologne and disappointed greed. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the hum of the hotel's air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic far below. Leo and Clara sat stunned, their carefully laid plans reduced to expensive paper and broken assumptions. "All these years," Leo whispered, looking at me as if seeing me for the first time, "you were just baking bread?" "I baked bread," I confirmed, standing with the dignity of someone who had just saved her life's work. "And I balanced the books. I managed the suppliers. I hired the staff. I maintained relationships with 3 generations of customers. And I paid attention. Your father and I built a business, not just an asset to be stripped and sold. The bakery is not for sale. It never was." The week that followed was thick with a heavy, wounded silence. My children avoided the bakery, processing their defeat and, I hoped, their shame. The regular customers noticed their absence. Mrs. Gable asked if Clara was feeling well, and old Mr. Kowalski wondered aloud if Leo had found a new job. I said nothing, waiting for them to find their way back to what mattered. Then, one Tuesday morning, Leo walked into the bakery, not in his usual armor of expensive suits and confident swagger, but in jeans and an old t-shirt I remembered from his college days. He looked lost, younger somehow, stripped of the corporate persona he had worn like a mask. "I don't know where to start," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper, carrying the humility of someone who had just learned how little he actually knew. I handed him an apron, the same one Arthur had worn, faded blue cotton softened by years of use. "You start with the flour," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You start by scrubbing the proofing drawers. You start by learning that every ingredient has a purpose, every step has meaning. Humility is the first ingredient in any recipe worth making." Clara came a few days later, her usual confidence replaced by something softer, more genuine. She didn't apologize with words. She was too proud for that. Too much her father's daughter. But she asked a question that told me everything I needed to know about her changing heart. She had been talking to Mrs. Gable, who told her a story I had forgotten, but Mrs. Gable had treasured for decades. During a harsh winter in the 80s when her husband was laid off from the factory, Arthur had given them bread on credit for 2 months, marking it down in the ledger as paid in full when they tried to pay him back after finding work again. Clara looked at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears, finally understanding the difference between price and value. "How do you put that on a balance sheet?" she asked, her voice small and wondering. That afternoon, she started an Instagram account for the bakery. Not with the neon signs and selfie walls she had originally envisioned, but with something far more valuable: truth. She posted portraits of our regulars, their faces lined with years and stories. She wrote short essays about where our ingredients came from, about the farmer who grew our wheat and the woman who brought us fresh eggs every Thursday. She filmed videos of my hands kneading dough, the muscle memory of 4 decades visible in every movement. She was telling our story, her way, with all the skills she had learned in her corporate life, but applied now to something that mattered. 6 months later, the bakery was more alive than ever. We had started an apprenticeship program for local kids, teaching them not just the technical skills of baking but the deeper lessons of service and community. Leo, his hands now perpetually dusted with flour and his MBA vocabulary replaced by the honest language of craft, was patiently teaching a teenager named Marcus how to score the top of a sourdough loaf, explaining how the cuts weren't just decorative but functional, allowing the bread to expand and become its truest self. Clara was taking a photo of him, but not for any marketing campaign, simply because the moment was beautiful, because her brother's face showed a peace she hadn't seen since he was a child. The scent of yeast, cinnamon, and burnt sugar filled the air, mingling with a new, brighter aroma. The smell of a legacy, not just preserved, but reborn. Arthur's wisdom had protected what we built, but it was love, messy, complicated, imperfect love, that would carry it forward into whatever came next. In the corner, my sourdough starter bubbled quietly in its jar, fed and tended as it had been for 40 years, a living symbol of continuity in a world obsessed with change. Some things, I had learned, are worth more than their market value. Some things are worth everything.